It's a tough act to follow, Norm and Aaron, but the energy, I think, is high at this point. I walked around at breakfast and lunch and break and was gobsmacked, to say the least, by the audience of CIOs and technologists and venture capitalists that are here. So thank you all for coming from as far away as Australia and Berlin and New York and also the UK. It's been a great day. I'd like to quickly introduce our panel of very esteemed executives who are here with us. I'll start from the other side of the room. Arnnon Geshuri is the Chief People Officer at Livongo. Livongo is a Sapphire portfolio company, very exciting, unicorn status, I think, at this point. Prior to Livongo, Arnnon scaled Tesla from 400 people to 35,000. And prior to that, he worked at a little company called Google just after its IPO when they were about 2,500 people, and he scaled that to 30,000 people. So amazing experience in terms of his background in onboarding, recruiting, HR. We're thrilled to have him here. Astrid Fontaine is here all the way from the UK. She is a board member in charge of people, IT, and digitization for Bentley Motors Limited, and prior worked at Porsche and also at Daimler-Benz. Amazing experience and interesting combining both IT and HR along with digitization. Then we have the fabulous Didier Elzinga, who is the CEO and co-founder of Culture Amp, which is the world's leading culture analytics platform. His customers include folks like Adobe and Nike and McDonald's, among others. Actually, Sapphire Ventures, too. We leverage it. And then we have Shakti. Shakti is here with us today from Pepsi out of New York, where he's responsible for both digitization and human resources for 260,000 employees across 83 countries. And with that, we thank you, and why don't we get started? All right, so my first question, and Astrid, maybe I'll start with you, is what role can CIOs and technology play to help build a strong talent base? And how can CIOs be of the most help to their HR counterparts?
Okay. Well, of course, for me right now, counterpart is probably not the right wording because of having both the CIO and the CHRO in one function. But nevertheless, I'm a firm believer that the people in the technology are moving closer and closer. For me, it's becoming a symbiosis in the future. And when we talk about future talent, it's the question of, on the one hand, where do we acquire the talent? And on the other hand, how do we as well, of course, develop the in-house talent? So coming from the view of technology, what does it mean? For me, I believe that anybody in any function in the companies nowadays needs to have a technology know-how and needs to have a digital mindset, because the technology is no longer just the ownership of IT. It is something that every function is involved with, that they need as a base skill almost nowadays. So what we do, for example, regarding building external or recruiting external talent is we have set up programs, for example, a digital technology apprenticeship, where we have people that are currently at university as well working with us at Bentley for a 4-year program, where they not only go through our, of course, IT group and IT team, they're also engaged within these 4 years in projects within our engineering, for example, in digital prototyping. They're also working in marketing when it comes to the topic of developing apps or developing virtual reality for our customers in the dealerships. So these people are becoming a view of the entire company of different functions, and as the program proceeds well with them, they have a guarantee as well to become one of our permanent members. These are programs, I think, where IT and HR closely collaborate to develop the programs, but also to manage them and mentor the people, and to get really the technology mindset into the functions. The same thing with regards to developing your internal talents. When I look into the topic of when you have your employees and you look through and discuss with them their career paths, nowadays more and more important is to give them the opportunities to move cross-functionally, and while they do that as well, to make sure that they have a touch point on the topics of technology and digitalization and transformation. Because without those people and the right mindsets, we will never get anywhere, at least when I come from the old economy, to transfer our companies into this new mindset and new economy.
Thank you. Anyone else want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll just add one thing maybe to that too, which I've noticed in talking to a lot of HR leaders, is they're grappling with a lot of change and trying to find good ways of managing that change. And so we're seeing them looking to technology for methodology. And so agile ways of working, the idea of running a product roadmap. I've actually spoken to a chief people officer who said she thinks of herself as a product manager, and she's product managing the way the company runs and trying to get her organization to borrow those languages and those ways of working and sprints and all these sorts of things. And that was actually a really interesting thing that I haven't seen before. That seems to be quite new.
I like it. Arnnon, I'll start with you here. What's the role of data and analytics in addressing everything from employee satisfaction to predicting talent outcomes?
Yeah, well, so maybe I'll start with a story.
Okay.
Yeah. So, hello everyone. Good to see you, everybody. I'll tell a Tesla story if you guys don't mind. So when I started with Tesla at the very beginning, it was about 400 people. And I started with the HR function, a very small HR function, 5 people. I knew I had to create a different HR organization, something different. And the traditional HR organization, you have generalists, and you have folks that support comp and just different functional areas. But I was with a team, exec team, that was very engineering focused. Very focused on technology, very focused on data, very focused on information. So I figured I'm going to recreate the way that HR functioned there and start differently. So I cashed in all of my open positions for a bunch of analytic roles. So I brought in a couple of econ majors, I brought in a statistician, I brought in a mathematician, an actuary, and I said, all right, I'm going to use this group to run and build an HR organization, a people ops organization that is based 100% on data flow, based 100% on information, on technology. So I immediately started to look at the organization. We brought all the data within the company, kind of harnessed it. I made sure that our data was clean. And then we started to look at the technology that I could partner with the internal IT organization and say, look, I need at this point applications and a database that I can store this people information so that we can start doing predictive analytics for the company. So I need to come to the executive meetings with data, with trend lines, with what's happening currently and where are we going. If I said, we need more programs and hugs and kisses everywhere, I would be laughed out of the room. And they don't want kisses. What they want is hard data. So I came in with constantly looking at information, measuring the success of the organization, productivity. We created metrics across the board. And it created a whole new methodology where we could look at the human function, look at productivity, look at people. And I built all the organizations around that. I built comp structure, I built benefit structures based on all the statisticians, the actuary, and it worked really well. So I found the most amazing seed of an HR organization, and we did all predictive analytics. A great one we did was we wanted to measure how fast or when a person would leave the company, like about attrition. And are there variables that are connected to people leaving? And so we looked at 20 different variables across the board. We measured it, and we found this algorithm that if we plugged in all the data, it actually predicted when they would leave within 6 months, right? So then we were able to use that and start looking ahead of time and saying, all right, based on all this data, we can be proactive in terms of our employee relations. We can engage our population and start using data to drive really great HR and business decisions. So I think it's really important, and that was the foundation for the Tesla HR organization.
Wow, that's fascinating. The actuary as a member of your team is interesting
too. An amazing benefits model. It was great, yeah.
We have a similar setup at PepsiCo where we have a whole set of PhDs that are only doing workforce analytics.
Okay.
And they look at the similar kind of stats plus a lot more. But the actual result of, I don't know what your results have been, but the actual result, we look at 250 components of various aspects of an individual. Wow. to figure out if they're going to leave the organization in the next 6 to 12 months or not. The accuracy on that, in spite of all the work we've done, is no more than maybe 20%, 30%. So if I can just take 3 out of those folks that were about to leave and save them, that's a ton of money saved for the organization to begin with. Not saying that that's not a good number, but it is really hard to get to be able to predict every person that's going to leave. But you have a good idea of which off this pool, which people are more likely to leave than not.
Right, and that's where like engagement comes in.
Yeah.
That's where culture amp comes in. Right, that's where all these different methodologies to make sure that your folks are connected to the company. So the data will drive you there, but you still have to have some of the HR
One
programs.
of the other things that we've started doing is, some time ago now, it's kind of a process. Every time we look at a business, and if it's not operating well, we actually send this workforce analytics people in, and they look at the talent and the business and the market and come back with, okay, what is it that you need to move this business forward in this country or in this region? And then what kind of talent do we have in the organization? Do we need to build, buy, or train, or whatever? And those analyses are then put into place by the business teams to actually run the business. So, pretty much a lot of times we're driving on how the business is going to move forward in a given market when they're not able to succeed. So that's, it's a pretty powerful set of data that's allowing the company to move forward in various markets in the business.
So this question can go out to all of you. I was thinking of addressing Didier initially because his company is in Melbourne and they have offices in London and New York and the US. How does data and your approach to data differ in Europe compared to, or EMEA compared to the United States?
I think everybody here would have a particularly interesting perspective on that. And there's at so many different levels. There's obviously an anthropological and cultural level that we have to take into account, particularly. I wouldn't want to have to deal with as many people as you do and try and figure out how to work across that. But I think I was just reflecting on what you were saying, Arnnon. I mean, firstly, what's so awesome about that story is that that's where you started and that you re-changed the relationship. And one of the dialogues that we are seeing at the moment, I've spoken to 2 people about it in the last 2 days, is the idea that people are bringing in non-traditional HR people to lead HR functions. Yeah. And part of that is to reset the relationship around business outcomes and bringing in this type of thinking. One of the things I worry about, and this comes back to answering your question, what we're seeing in Europe is obviously a different data privacy environment, and we think things like GDPR, and not just from the cost of actually implementing that, philosophically, it is turning something on its head, which is that historically, workforce analytics, predictive analytics, has been the gathering of data from the many for the benefit of the few. So we're pulling all this data on all of our employees, and then we have a small group of highly trained people that are making decisions. And what we're seeing now is that we're saying if I'm collecting data on you and I can't explain the value to you, I'm not allowed to collect that data anymore. And that's really changing the way we're thinking about what we're going to be able to do, but also what we should do. And so we're seeing more of that in Europe than we are in the US, but I think it's coming. And I think it's asking the right questions, which is, to your point too, like you can build a model and it can tell you that 10 of the 100 people are going to leave, but it can't tell you which 10. Or it can tell you which 10 in the group, but it can't tell you that that person is going to leave. And my biggest concern, which is not a cultural one, but a philosophical one, is how do we train people to properly use statistical learning and not misuse statistical learning? Because everyone just wants an answer, but if they don't understand the nuance of that answer, that can be really, really difficult. And I think they're the sorts of things that we're going to have to struggle with now that we've finally got a seat at the table. We actually have to say, just be careful with what I'm giving you. I mean, I'd love more perspective from people on the table that are dealing with this in large companies.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a perspective on the interpretation of the data from a business perspective. So, so first of all, I think a big hurdle, and I don't know if folks in the audience would agree with this, but HR data historically has not been good, right? I don't know. So they come with an org chart, and they say, wait a minute, this person moved 2 weeks ago. Why are they still reporting to this person? And then in the first conversation, in the first 5 minutes, you've shot your credibility. You're done. You're screwed. So then the HR person goes out all sad, and that's the end of the conversation. So the key is to make sure that the database, right, that the information is accurate and it's audited and it's trusted, because then you can take a look at it, and when you start making interpretations of it, right, and start looking at and having discussions, like here's what the data trends say, people trust the information, and then they say, all right, now we can make meaningful interpretations of this. And then it trains people to look away from like pinpointing like that's wrong, to say, all right, we trust the data, now we can actually have a useful conversation about the trend lines and where we're going, and to make good business decisions. So early on, I made sure that the data was 100% accurate. I would have people travel the world, and actually, if the finance team can close out quarterly, so can HR, right? So the same kind of concept, and the numbers have to be perfect. So that was a key thing to build trust, and then you train the organization to be interpretive and to work with it on a business perspective.
Yeah, I think HR data, you're right, is always been the Achilles heel in discussions when it comes to HR. I think we've come a long way with the digital transformation that we've been on. We are on one single platform across the globe, across 83 countries. Yes, but data is still entered at source. So you have to remember that every individual is responsible for entering parts of their data, whether it is through talent acquisition, when you're hired, or whether by the managers when people have movements or terminations and stuff like that. There is still that nut to be cracked in terms of making sure the data is accurate all the time. Couple of things we've done is implemented some of the AI stuff on top of this, so we can take away a lot of this complex transactions that the managers have to do. Even with the cloud applications and the latest and greatest tools and processes, transactional processing for manager is really difficult, because you have position management. Along with position management, you have hundreds of different elements that are needed for an individual to be processed, whether it's cost center or legal entity or whatever have you. So you have to think about how to simplify that to be able to bring those transactions to a point where it can be done really simply and people engage with it, rather than kind of go in saying, hey, do I really need to do this? So it's going back to the question on Europe, I think culture is the biggest issue when it comes to Europe. You and I were talking about this at one of the discussions we were having. Corporate always thinks they know everything, right? So whether the corporate sits in Europe or sits in the US, that doesn't change. What changes is how people behave when something comes at them. And in Europe, from our experience, the change is really, really hard. Not to say in the US it's easy, but it's really hard in Europe. In some countries, it's really difficult. And so you have to really think about change management as a big part of your transformation. Otherwise, you won't be able to get there. And that drives the engagement as well.
But that's also coming back to the topic of where do CIOs and CHROs then really team up. And I think right now with many companies that are coming from the old legacy world, it's really that close connection between the technology and the HR folks to transfer HR into what you were able to actually to build from a greenfield. I mean, many of us are actually not in that liberty to find a greenfield and build from scratch. Many of us find a hodgepodge of systems that lead to that kind of data inconsistency that we have in HR, and how do you make it work? And that's really where you team up the technology guys from the IT with the HR, and it's overall then a big transition for the HR people themselves to move away from just being an administrator to free up that time through the new systems world and become actually more empathy-driven and being more out there with your functional areas, to be more of a consultant and a business partner to them. Yeah. So it's really a big transition that I currently see in our own HR team, to be able to transform themselves and their own understanding of who they are. And IT being more on the baseline and delivering.
The biggest hurdle to HR transformation is HR itself. For some reason. But I think it can be managed as long as you have the highest levels of support in the organization to move that forward. In large companies, this is a long haul transformation, so you need to have that consistent support throughout the journey, and you have to make it happen. But it's not an easy thing to do.
And one thing, if I can just add one thing this too, because earlier when Arnnon was talking about the transition, marketing being the new CIO and then is HR the new CIO, I think the thing that we are seeing, to your point, which is really powerful, is that you're bringing this data in-house and you're making this data always on, so people are able to assess what they're doing against outcomes on the people side. And what we often find when we work with clients, and I go to them and say, did you learn something from our survey or from our tool that you didn't know? And they're like, well, actually, we kind of guessed at it, but now we know and now we have to do something. And it's the fact that the data allows you to create the case for change. And with a predictive model, you can actually help the exec team understand that if you don't do anything, half the women in engineering will leave. And you can choose that if you want, but that is a choice that you are making. And that's so much more powerful for getting executive buy-in than HR turning up and saying we should do this thing because it's the right thing to do. We're actually saying you have a choice now, and we can show you what will happen depending on which one you do, and all that scenario modeling and so on is actually getting really, really interesting.
Powerful too. This next question builds upon what Chris Anderson from 3DR talked about this morning in his keynote, and also the AI panel. With technologies automating jobs at companies across all industries, how can CIOs and CHROs work together to prepare workforces?
I think it's a very difficult question to answer because at the end of the day, it is directly dependent on the type of organization that you're leading. If you're talking about Bentley or PepsiCo, you're looking at, average age. I don't know what the average age is in Bentley. But before I go there, by the way, she's promised us all 40% discount on Bentley. Because we were on a panel with her. If we're nice to her, she may go up to 50%. But so the old school, the companies who've been here forever. I mean, we've been here over 100 years. Wow. We have talent in the company. We have an average age of 41 years. You can throw as much technology you want, but if they don't adopt it, it becomes a big problem. So you really have to think about how do you understand the digital fitness of an organization? And that's where CIOs and CHROs can really partner to figure that out, because unless you have that nailed, you will not be able to do any successful transformation in the company. You'll be able to do it in the back office and the operations and things like that. When it comes to people and interacting with people and people behaving differently, it is really important to understand that digital fitness. And we now have just recently, this is an experience that came through our HR transformation that we have done. HR transformation, as you can imagine, with self-service touches literally every employee in the organization. Across 83 countries, multiple languages, multiple cultures, multiple ways of thinking. So we had to think about how do you get to a point where we understand the organization's digital fitness. And there are 4 elements to it. The mindset and the behavior is the first 2 elements. Those are really critical to understand, because if that's not right, your overall organization is not going to be able to adopt that transformation that you're putting on. The second, the third and fourth is relationship and skills. Without those, you cannot deploy transformation to begin with. So these 4 elements have to be judged. So we launched this app with PwC and IT and the whole team together to understand the digital fitness of our organization before we head into massive transformation across the globe, which we've been doing, but it is hard and tough. So, we've taken a different tack. Let's think of this from a digital fitness perspective and figure out those 4 elements and get a score. And so we have a company average score, and every individual has its score so they can understand where they stand. And then they are allowed to then go in and opt in to be an Olympian or be a beginner or somewhere in the journey in between. And that will allow that app to then feed them information so they can get ahead in that journey and improve their digital score. That's a massive exercise, across 300,000 people in 83 countries, which is going to be really important for us to understand what's happening. So that's sort of, that will drive on how you think about this differently, and that's where I think that partnership is really important.
Wow. I'm going to move on and ask this question of Astrid, because I loved what your website said at Bentley about you curating special learning platforms and programs for the employees of Bentley Motors. My question is this: what is the future of learning platforms and learning strategies in an ever-changing world where playbooks for employee success are often in flux?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we have to be careful when we talk about learning platforms that we not only think about the e-learning, because quite often we fall, I think, into that trap to think all is nowadays technology enabled, all is about the topic of just going online, any place, anywhere you want and learn. I think what we shouldn't miss is as well that a big topic in learning is as well the topic of experiences. And it's the topic as well of sometimes being taught and being together in that kind of learning environment. So what we try to do is when we talk with our employees through their career development passes on where it could lead them at some point in time, we make sure as well that it's not just a skill level, but it's also the topic of the social and this engagement and experiences, so that there is a component, for example, that they take assignments again in other functional areas. And while they do that, of course, the job is kept open in the functional area that lends them out, that there's a chance to either bring somebody else in or take a contractor for a while, but just creating these opportunities for people to go beyond of what they have seen so far. And then either they choose to come back into the functional area or to further explore and help our company to move forward with them entering another functional area with a fresh set of eyes. So far we have a very good experience with these learning platforms to be cross-disciplinary and as I said, more of a holistic view than just the e-learning, that we can sometimes just think what a platform is. And it becomes this kind of personal approach. So I sometimes take it maybe a little bit from the pure data-driven, a little bit, it feels sometimes a little bit anonymous, to more of a, again, bringing the person into the middle of it and being as customized and as personal as possible in the experience. But that might be easy for me to say we are just 5,000 people towards 270,000 people. But I think it's still, to some degree, scalable and doable.
But I think it's a really important point. Not, cross-functional moves are not meant for everybody. Some people can do it, some people can't do it. Somebody was asking me, why is HR being so successful at PepsiCo in terms of transformation, and what was your kind of couple of nuggets of why you were so successful in this journey? And I was telling them, I said, I started my career in manufacturing. I moved to manufacturing to IT to finance, to planning, and then in HR. So it allows me to now speak the language of all of these different functions. And when I work with them and their employees, they have a little bit of a trust, saying, hey, he knows what he's talking about, so let's listen to him at least, if nothing else. So it starts with a positive note. And that has helped me understand the business to begin with. So it's helpful, but it's not meant for everybody. It's something that is really important. But on-the-job training, 80-20, is a classic principle that most companies apply, including PepsiCo. So it's really important to learn on the job. And you have to, from a digital transformation perspective, every function needs to experiment with the teams on sort of doing small things. Failing or succeeding doesn't matter, but doing small things to get people to understand how this whole thing works. So it's a journey.
So Arnnon, this last question is for you, and then we might have time for one or two questions from the audience, and that's it. What are your views on the distributed workforce in terms of productivity and employee satisfaction? And then what models have you found to be effective? And finally, is the gig economy making a difference in your workforce, either at Livongo or I'm sure at Google or at Tesla? If you have a story you want to share, feel free.
Yeah. So I'll tee up, ask the panel to help me with this one. So just looking at the world today, I just looked up a few stats just to really understand over time how things are migrating and changing. So it says that 36% of the U.S. workforce is part of the gig economy, right? 36%. And then say basically in 2 years, it's going to be up to 40%. So 40% of the working American population is going to be part of the gig economy. That means they're working from home, they're working remote, they're working as contractors. They're distributed across the United States. So it seems pretty logical, and love to hear other people's opinions, that we have to embrace that, right? We have to embrace this new workforce that is that's everywhere. And a quick story about Livongo is that we had a company that we acquired early this year, and out of the 100 people that were in the company, only 6 people worked in an office. The other the other folks were all distributed across the United States. They work from home, they work remotely. This is all parts of the organization, IT, everything. They had a culture of almost 100% distributed workforce. So that means they built their entire culture around that. They used video exclusively, like they really pushed down just having phone calls. They wanted to see people. They created this remote culture to get people engaged and connected. And so they've embraced that entire distributed workforce and built an entire culture that brought those people together as one community, and were very successful. I mean, very productive, and that's why we acquired them. So now we're using that type of methodology into Livongo to actually augment our culture as well, and help build this great methodology where we're looking at a distributed workforce as well, and bringing new people in. But I don't know, what do you guys think about distributed workforce? You guys, is it good, encouraging?
I just feel right now it's a big cultural difference between when I look from the US to the Europe. And I think the European environment is not yet as far along when it comes to this geek culture than what I see in the US. So in Europe, we still deal with the people, I would say 90% coming to work every day, and are used to be at one place and live close to where your employer is. It might be coming in the long run, but definitely currently there's a big divide, I think, here between what we see as becoming a trend and a common way of working towards these two continents.
We're seeing that a lot. I mean, this is a trend that is ongoing. The contractor population continues to grow, and the employee population continues to shrink, whether it is managed services or direct contractors. Things are changing. Even the frontline employees, when I call them frontlines, blue-collar workers, we have 80% of them are blue-collar workers. It is really hard for companies like Manpower and Pontoons of the world to be able to supply the demand that these companies have at the time they have. So now the economy and the selling cycle and the way you sell in the market is changing so fast and rapidly, you cannot really work with open positions and open jobs if you're going to be efficient in the market. So you have to think through on how do you engage this population. There's a number of new startups that are trying to address this. One of the ones I remember is Shift Smart. These are companies that are trying to create an Uber-type model for temp labor. So you have all these people on an Uber-type model, and the companies can go in and pick the person they need for the hours they need, on the day they need, on the location they need, and they just click a button, the person shows up, does the work, and goes away, as long as that person has been certified in the work that you're doing. So it's changing the whole culture, and it's going to continue to change. And there's more to come on this. This is not done yet. So the whole engagement piece differs. I've talked about engagement in many forums about, people talk about employee engagement, and I say employee engagement is as good as the systems and the processes they deal with in the organization. If that is really bad experience, then the engagement is going to be lower, whether we like it or not. We can do as many things, put as many applications for engagement to find out what it is, but unless you fix that, you're not going to be able to move forward. So when you think about that in a space where majority of our population is not going to be working for you, how do you deal with that? So you have to think about all of these because this is changing really rapidly.
Yeah. And one quick comment, just another stat I thought was interesting is that the distributed workforce is over 20% higher in employee satisfaction than people going to the office. Yep. So many studies out there show across the United States that people going to the office, 51% satisfied, and 72% are satisfied in their distributed model. So inherently, employee satisfaction is really high, and that's going to help with the retention and other areas that are going to be a positive trend. So just kind of keeping that in mind as you're thinking about it.
Awesome, thanks for sharing that. We're a couple minutes over, so maybe we'll just take one or two questions and then get a chance to mix and mingle with these folks at our reception tonight.